Atlanta wasn't Chicago. The air here clung different, wet, heavy, scented with magnolia and exhaust. Even in winter, it curled around the skin like it meant to stay. The nights were slower, stretched out in neon and cigarette haze. Miranda liked to tell herself she came for the quiet. 3 states in a year between her and the skyline that once kept her awake. No more blood under her nails from pouring drinks in the wrong bar. No more shadows leaning too close, murmuring her name like it belonged to them. Chicago had taught her how to survive. Eyes always sweeping the room, back never to the door, voice soft enough to slip under tempers before they broke. It also taught her the kind of love that left bruises in invisible places. Men who measured affection and control, loyalty in fear. In Atlanta, she was just Miranda, a waitress in a corner diner off Ponce, pouring weak coffee for regulars who'd long ago given up on better. The place smelled like fryer oil and old stories. The booths cracked and patched with duct tape that didn't bother pretending to match. Nobody asked questions here. That was part of the draw. She'd been here 3 months, long enough to learn who tipped, who didn't, and which shifts were slow enough for the jukebox to stall between songs. Long enough to almost believe the past could fade, like steam off a grill. That morning had started like they all did, but by the end of the day, this morning would be totally different. This morning put her on the path to midnight. A year and 300 miles from Chicago, and still the city clung to Miranda like smoke in a winter coat. Stale, stubborn, impossible to shake. Atlanta had been meant to be her quiet corner, a place where her name didn't echo between bad-shaped lapel pins and leather jackets with blood beneath the cuffs. The corner diner off Ponce was no palace, but it offered anonymity. 3 months in, she could predict every regular's order before they sat. Grits, bacon, burnt toast, weak coffee, and gossip sharp enough to shave with. That morning had started no different. Grease and grumble, just the way she needed it. She was mid-pour, topping off Mr. Billingsley's mug. The old cop wore his precinct cap like armor, though the fabric was threadbare and curling at the brim. He never tipped, but he called her kiddo, and something in the way he said it made her let it slide. He looked her in the eye. That counted for something. Then the door jingled, and the man who walked in wasn't him, but something about the way he walked sucked the air out of the room just the same. He moved like someone who already knew the shape of things. Tall, calm, dark hair, sports coat over a black tee, jeans neat but not pressed. His eyes scanned the booths, calculating. He picked a stool with the cracked vinyl and a clear view of both door and window. Tactical, dangerous. "Just coffee," he said, voice smooth, low. The kind that didn't try to impress. It simply was. Miranda poured the cup. The wall clock read 9:27. Behind her, Becky muttered curses at the orange juice machine. 19, fresh out of hope and brimming with complaints. "New face," Miranda murmured, passing a glass her way. Becky glanced. Trouble? Miranda's eyes lingered on the man's posture, relaxed but alert, like someone waiting for a gunshot. "Not sure yet," she said, "but he sits like he's expecting a bullet." Becky smirked. "Your radar's spooky, Mir." Spooky or not, it had kept her alive this long. Miranda drifted back behind the counter, but her eyes kept sliding his direction. He hadn't touched his coffee, checked his phone. One glance, then tucked away. Again, 7 minutes later. Same move, intentional. He waited for the diner to thin out. After Mrs. Carter and her oxygen tank wheeled their way out. After the construction guys stopped arguing about the Falcons' offensive line. Then he spoke. Don't panic. Miranda froze, one hand still on the coffee pot. I'm not panicking, she said evenly, even though her pulse had already started to spike. The man? Shane, he said. Just Shane. Didn't offer a badge, just a presence. He was a private investigator on a trail that started in a warehouse in Cicero, her ex's old haunt, a place where favors were bartered and silence enforced. Someone's been sent, Shane told her. North Side Muscle. Knows your ex. Knows you. Miranda said nothing, but the tightening in her jaw was answer enough. You're telling me this why? She asked. Because men like him. Shane met her eyes, steady and calm. They don't stop, and they don't forgive. There was something in his tone, flat and weighted, like a drawer sliding shut. A sound she knew all too well. She didn't argue, didn't have to. He could read it all, the fear packed neatly beneath eyeliner and grease-stained knuckles. Shane didn't press, just took a sip from his now cold cup. She offered him a waffle, instinct more than kindness. Plain, he said. No butter, no syrup. The kind of order meant to stretch time, not enjoy it. The kitchen clanged behind them. Becky cursed out the dishwasher. Shane checked his phone again. This time, a flicker of something crossed his face. His jaw tensed just slightly. Then his hand drifted under his coat. Not flashy, not a threat. Just memory. He left cash. Didn't finish the waffle. Gave a nod and disappeared into the daylight as the bell above the door sang his exit. Miranda returned to clear the counter. 3 $5 bills folded crisp rested beneath the saucer. Tucked inside them, a torn slip of paper. No name, just a number. She didn't call it, not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. Men like Shane didn't walk into diners like hers for the eggs. In shadows, they never knock. They just let themselves in. The first tip Miranda ever got in Atlanta was 2 crumpled singles, left beneath a chipped coffee mug that smelled more like cheap cigarettes than Colombian roast. He'd been sitting in booth 3, the one by the window that leaked when it rained. His navy blue precinct cap looked like it had survived more years than some buildings, letters worn down to a ghost gray whisper. The windbreaker he wore was too heavy for Georgia's heat, but he didn't seem to notice, just sat quiet, nursing black coffee and demanding his eggs done right, which according to him meant scrambled to death. Miranda hadn't known him then, didn't know his name, didn't know he came in like clockwork, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays. Didn't know he'd always sit facing the door, like old habits were hard to shake. Back then, he was just another man with tired eyes and a tone that made kiddo sound like it still belonged on a rotary phone. But when she dropped off the check, he looked up from his plate. His eyes squinted, sharp under the shadow of the cap. You're not from here, he said. No, sir, she replied, straight-backed, polite. Good, he said. Maybe you'll bring some life into this place. He slid the check to the edge of the table, tucked 2 worn bills beneath it, and walked out without another word. She never spent them. Those bills, creased, smudged, still carrying the faint scent of diner grease, were folded between a bus station receipt and an unsent letter in the back of her journal. That had been her first day on the job, her second day in Atlanta. Later that afternoon, she stood out back on her break, not smoking, just breathing. The heat wrapped around her like a damp shawl, thick and slow and intimate. It wasn't like Chicago's heat, dry and biting. This was southern heat, wet and close, like it had intentions. It made her sweat through her collar, made her bones feel too snug in her skin. But the sky, The sky stretched wide in Atlanta, unbothered and endless. The clouds didn't cling. They moved like they had plans. The trees reached for them like old lovers who still had hope. She missed Chicago sometimes. Missed the L rattling past her window. The way the snow quieted the streets, even the sirens. She missed corner dogs wrapped in wax paper, mouth-burning pizza slices, and the popcorn from Navy Pier that left sugar under her fingernails. But she didn't miss the lock she had to change twice in 1 year. Didn't miss the boot steps on the stairwell that made her stomach twist. Didn't miss waking up to apologies with blood still drying under his fingernails. Atlanta had its flaws. The diner lights too bright, the jukebox with a mind of its own, and a manager who smelled like cheap regret. But it gave her something Chicago never could: space to breathe. And every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, the ex-cop in booth 3 called her kiddo and left exact change. Except that first day. That day, he left $2 and a beginning. By 3:40, the diner quieted down. The breakfast plates had been scraped clean and cleared, and the early lunch crowd wouldn't shuffle in for another hour. Becky had already clocked out, grumbling something about her roommate, and Miranda was left behind, wiping down the counter in slow, deliberate circles. Her rag moved over a phantom coffee ring. Nothing there, just muscle memory playing on repeat. The jukebox, for once, kept its mouth shut. The only sounds were the low hum of the fridge and the hiss of a cooling grill. Miranda finished restocking napkins, flipped chairs onto tables, and took one last lap through the dining room. The air carried its usual cocktail: fryer oil, lemon disinfectant, a trace of maple syrup that clung to the vents. It should have felt normal, safe, but her fingers wouldn't stop fidgeting. Shane had left more than a cash tip and a scribbled number. He'd left behind something that clung, a charge in the air, like static under her skin. She tried to shake it, but it buzzed beneath the surface. She settled into booth 5, tucked near the back, cracked vinyl seat with a view of the parking lot. From there, she pulled out her phone and the slip of paper from her apron pocket. It was still neatly folded, still waiting. She smoothed the crease flat on the table, pressed her thumb to the paper like she could feel his pulse through it. She opened her messages, then stared. Her fingers hovered above the screen, ready to type something simple. Is this Shane? She didn't send it. Still, under different stars, different rules, she might have wanted that number for more selfish reasons. He had the kind of jaw that could carve a woman clean through, and eyes that looked like they'd taken damage and kept going anyway. Cold on the surface, kind underneath. Like someone who carried pain the way some men carried knives. Hidden, but always close. She folded the number again, slipped it back into her pocket. She wasn't ready to go home. Her apartment was a box tonight. 4 walls that pressed too tight against the ribs. So she went to Lowlight, a bar 3 blocks from the diner, tucked between a shuttered pawn shop and a laundromat with half its machines busted. It was dark inside, quiet enough, and nobody pretended it was fancier than it was. It was a bourbon bar. No backstories required. Casey was behind the counter, in her usual black tank top and thin gold chain. Her eyeliner winged sharp, lips glossed just enough to catch the light. She looked like she did every shift, deliberately inviting without being available. Casey made tips-off looks, not promises. Rough shift? She asked, sliding Miranda her usual before the words even finished. Something like that, Miranda said softly, taking the stool nearest the middle. Love the look tonight, she added, nodding toward Casey's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Casey smirked. Pays the bills, especially with the silver foxes escaping their sad little conferences. Like a cue from the universe, one sat down beside Miranda. mid-50s, hair that probably cost more than rent, a button-up that still had the tag crease. He smelled like aftershave and work trip infidelity. "Evening," he said, voice polished like glass. "You from around here?" Miranda gave him a nod, just enough to count. "Atlanta," he said, smiling like a cat, full of beautiful women who don't know how beautiful they are. She sipped her drink. "You've got that look," he smiled. "Smart. Tired of boys. Looking for simple." "Simple," she echoed. He leaned in, not too close, but just enough. "Suite at the Grand Wyndham, top floor. King bed, minibar, room service. We could not talk about anything real until morning." "Tempting," she said. His eyes lit up. But no. He tried again. Said he ran the restaurants in Buckhead. That he could show her the best of the city. Called himself great company. "Still no," she said, kind but firm. He finished his drink, dropped a 20, and left with a shrug. No fight in him, just disappointment that barely cracked the surface. Casey leaned over with a grin. "Girl, you could have had a sugar daddy." Miranda shook her head, smiling. "I like my men a little less conference casual." "Fair," Casey said, laughing as she refilled the glass without asking. Miranda was halfway through her second when she saw them. A couple curled up in the shadowy booth near the jukebox. The woman was blonde, short bob, fishnets under a denim skirt. The man had that lean, possessive posture. One arm wrapped tight around her, the other hand drifting along her thigh like it belonged there. They weren't being subtle, but they weren't being sleazy either. It was hunger. Real, electric, all-consuming. Miranda watched the girl press into him. Watched how he touched her like the world had narrowed down to just that bar, that booth, that kiss. They laughed when they finally came up for air and left hand in hand without looking back. Gone like a secret whispered too loud. Miranda looked down at her drink. It wasn't jealousy, it was absence. She'd had lovers, nights, stories she didn't tell anymore. But not that, not the kind of pull that made your skin sing, made your breath catch, made the city fade away. Not since Chicago turned from skyline to cage. She downed the bourbon and gave Casey a nod. Another pour, no questions. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Inside, Miranda sat still, pretending she didn't miss anything. But God, she did. The bar murmured around Miranda, low jazz from the speakers, the click of glass on wood, laughter curling out from the booths in the back like smoke. She cradled the last of her bourbon, slow circles tracing amber against the glass, her thoughts loosening in the warmth. And then, without permission, Chicago answered. Not the skyline, not the L. It was Jake. Jake had never been the worst of them. He wasn't loud, he didn't flex, he just stood there. Quiet, steady, a shadow built from muscle and silence. When Miranda's ex grew suspicious, paranoid in the way dangerous men often are, Jake was the one sent to keep her safe. He called it protection. He called Jake trustworthy. That made it worse. One night stuck more than the rest. Early spring. The kind of cold that refused to leave, clinging to the city's bones. Her ex had just pulled off something bloody. A warehouse job that left more chalk outlines than survivors. He came home flush with power, jittery with ego, which meant Miranda needed watching. Jake got the assignment. They walked in silence, side by side, through alleys slick with city grime. Halfway home, the rain started. No warning, no build-up. Chicago rain. The kind that hit like a grudge. No umbrella, no complaints. By the time they reached her apartment, they were soaked through. Jackets heavy, shoes squishing, hair plastered flat. She unlocked the door and left it open behind her. No invitation needed. He followed, quiet as ever. They stood in her kitchen. She leaned on the fridge. He hovered by the counter. The heater ticked somewhere under the floorboards. Rain whispered against the window. Neither spoke. Then it happened. The look. Just a second. Maybe two. Jake's eyes locked on hers. Not with duty, not with suspicion, but with want. Honest and raw. The kind that stripped everything else away. And Miranda looked back like she didn't give a damn about consequences. He moved first. Slow, cautious. Like every step might be a mistake. She met him halfway. Fingers brushed his shoulder. A breath. A pause. And then the kiss. Not greedy. Not rushed. Just real. For the first time in months, she wasn't an object. Wasn't a liability. Wasn't somebody's fragile thing to guard or break. She was wanted. But Jake broke it. He pulled back like the kiss had burned. Shook his head, jaw tight, breath thick with regret. "I can't," he whispered. "Not while he's still..." He didn't finish, just left. Didn't even grab a towel. 2 weeks passed before she saw him again. When she did, the moment had been packed away, hidden like a broken bottle in the back of a cupboard. But she remembered. God, she remembered. The way he looked at her that night, like the couple in the bar earlier, heat pressed against desire, all tangled up in something that couldn't survive in a place like Chicago. She was still there in that rain-soaked memory, when Casey's voice brought her back. "Where'd you go just now?" the bartender asked, wiping the counter with a flick of her wrist. Miranda blinked, lips curling into a half-smile. Somewhere far away. She left a tip and slipped out without fanfare. The air had cooled, the edges of summer peeling back to let the night breathe. Street lamps painted long reflections across the wet concrete, and she walked slow, hands in her coat pockets, fingers brushing the folded paper tucked tight. Shane. She paused beneath a flickering pawn shop sign, red neon casting her face in restless color. She pulled out her phone, then the number, typed a message, deleted it, typed again. This time she sent it. "It's Miranda from the diner." Simple, but not really. She stared at the screen, no reply. By the time she climbed the steps to her apartment, the knot between her shoulder blades had returned. She dropped her keys into the bowl, peeled off her coat, and collapsed onto the couch with the phone still in her hand. The screen glowed. Still nothing. She leaned back, closed her eyes. She wasn't tired, just hollowed out. Something was moving toward her. She could feel it in the hush. And this time, she wasn't sure she could outrun it. The apartment held its quiet like a breath. Not calm, not comforting, just still. The kind of still that settled in corners and clung to the walls like dust. She didn't bother turning on the lights in the living room. Just the hallway, just enough to see. In the bathroom, the overhead bulb flickered once before flooding the mirror in its usual unforgiving glare. It cast shadows under her eyes, deepened the lines along her jaw. No lies in that reflection. The lipstick was faint now, just a smear of red clinging to the corner of her mouth like a secret. Her eyes looked older than yesterday. Not tired, worn, like weathered glass. She stared a beat longer than she meant to, as if the mirror might offer her a sign, a direction. All it gave her was the same woman who left Chicago with scars no one could see. Her phone rested on the edge of the sink, blank, no calls, no new messages. Still nothing from Shane. She turned on the faucet in the tub. The pipes groaned, water steaming as it rushed in. She poured the last of her lavender soak beneath the tap, the scent rising soft and slow. A quiet indulgence, one of the only ones she still allowed. Miranda stripped down, hair unpinned and falling in loose waves over her shoulders. She stepped into the bath, one leg at a time, the heat licking up her skin, claiming her. She sank low, the water swallowing her with a sigh. The city faded outside the walls, the neon hum, the dogs barking down the block, the car alarms, the sirens. All of it dissolved in the hiss of steam and the rhythm of her breath. No customers, no stairs, no past, just water, just heat. She stayed longer than she meant to. Skin wrinkled, water cooled. Still she lingered, the way people do when they know what's waiting outside the moment isn't as kind. Eventually she climbed out, the threadbare towel clinging to her as she moved through the apartment. The phone sat where she'd left it, still blank. Figures. She pulled on her usual sleep armor, an oversized t-shirt from some thrift rack long ago, soft from too many washes, hem brushing mid-thigh, panties underneath, no lace, no pretense, just enough. Miranda sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, screen dim. Then, a buzz. One message. Tomorrow after work. I will be waiting outside the diner. No name, no wasted words. Just like him. She exhaled, fingers tapping. I'll be there. Phone down. Charger in. The silence returned, but it was different now. Charged, like a room just before the curtain rises. Something was coming. She stretched back on the mattress, the ceiling fan spinning above like a lazy clock. Her thoughts wandered, back to the bar, to the girl in fishnets, to the man tracing lines up her thigh like he was reading a language only he understood. Miranda could still see them, flushed, laughing, lost in each other like they'd forgotten the world. And for a breath, she let herself slip into the image. She imagined being touched like that, held like that, wanted like that. The image of the couple from the bar danced in her mind, his hand on her thigh, her mouth curved in a smile that said she felt wanted, desired, claimed. Miranda swallowed hard. Her fingers brushed the waistband of her underwear. She stopped herself. Instead, her mind wandered to Jake. Of that night. Rain had poured like it meant to drown the city. They'd walked without a word, soaked down to their bones. And when the door shut behind them, something shifted. Electric, breathless. The kiss wasn't messy. It was careful, reverent. Like two people who weren't supposed to find comfort in each other, but did anyway. His mouth tasted like whiskey and something softer. Sorrow, maybe. Guilt. He'd pulled away, whispered about him, and then he left, quiet as he'd come. She turned on her side, sheets tugging around her. The memory pulsed warm beneath her skin, deeper than the bath ever reached. She closed her eyes, not ready for sleep, not ready to dream, just wondering what tomorrow would bring, and whether Shane was a promise waiting at the curb, or the next ghost with a name she'd have to forget. The alarm split the silence like a blade, not a gentle chime, not some polite whisper. Miranda's phone screamed to life with the blunt force of a freight train pulling her from a dream she couldn't remember but still missed. She silenced it with a groggy swipe, stared at the ceiling, cracked, familiar, quietly accusing. A beat passed, then came the sound. The couple next door. Laughter, hushed and private. A soft farewell. The creak of a door closing like a sigh. Footsteps followed, deliberate, steady, fading down the hall past her own. She pictured him in a clean shirt, coffee thermos in one hand, a paper bag lunch in the other. One of those domestic illusions stitched together in early morning gray. She wasn't jealous, not really, just aware of what wasn't there. Her feet found the hardwood floor, cool, grounding. She moved through the motions, toothbrush, comb, red lipstick painted with more confidence than she felt. In the mirror, her eyes held the same quiet as yesterday, but something beneath them itched, like the start of a bruise. Outside, the city stirred. The sky had rolled in low and moody, clouds hanging like threats. The scent of coming rain pressed into her collarbones. She pulled her jacket tight, boots clipping pavement, and walked fast. The hum of Atlanta rising around her, tires on wet asphalt, radios crackling from corner bodegas, the breath of a city just beginning to stretch. By the time she reached the diner, the first drops fell. Not real rain, just a tease, a warning. The bell over the door gave its usual weak jingle. Inside, it was the same rhythm as always. Forked tines against chipped plates, the lull of low conversation, the hum of the jukebox between songs. Familiar, too familiar. She nodded to Carla, already elbow deep in sugar refills. The woman gave her a knowing smile, one that said they'd both done this too many mornings to pretend it was new. Miranda slid into the day like it was a second skin. Apron tied at the waist, coffee pot in hand, boots squeaking across tile. She moved table to table, pouring warmth into cracked mugs, offering tired greetings that passed for affection. Then she saw him. 3 stools from the end. Jake. Coffee in one hand, toast half eaten. His elbows rested on the counter like he'd been there forever. Her stomach dropped, sudden and sharp. Time hadn't taken much from him, a few new creases near the eyes, maybe. But everything else was the same. The jaw, the watch, the calm. Those eyes that once looked at her like she was both the fire and the match. He saw her, and the air went still. She didn't hesitate, moved behind the counter, leaned in close, voice low and loaded. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jake didn't flinch, didn't blink. His voice came quiet, stripped of bravado. "He wants you back, Miranda." And just like that, the floor shifted. Shane hadn't been warning her about some nameless brute. He'd been warning her about Jake. "You're kidding," she said, voice tight with disbelief. "You came all this way just to play his errand boy?" Jake shook his head, sipped his coffee. No dramatics, just facts. "I came to bring you back. Tonight, if you're smart." He's getting impatient. She laughed, sharp, too loud in the hum of the diner. Carla glanced over but said nothing. "Impatient," Miranda said. "You mean violent." Jake didn't argue, just looked at the counter like it might offer him an easier truth. "You can't outrun him forever." She leaned in closer. The anger in her chest didn't burn. It froze, cold, focused. "Watch me." Jake didn't answer. He didn't try to convince her. He just pulled a few bills from his coat, folded, clean, enough for the check, enough to say he wasn't here to threaten. Then he stood, looked at her one last time, not angry, not pleading, just tired. The bell above the door rang as he stepped out into the drizzle. Miranda stood there, coffee pot heavy in her grip. The scent of rain pressed through the cracks in the windows, tangled with the smell of grease and toast. Jake was gone, but nothing was the same. The board had shifted. And outside, somewhere in the slow brewing storm of the day, Shane would be waiting. Jake's departure left the air thick as old grease. Miranda stood still for a moment, her fingers trembling just enough to notice when she reached for the coffee pot again. The clink of ceramic mugs, the chatter of the morning regulars. It all returned like nothing had happened. But inside her, the ground had shifted. She went through the motions for the rest of her shift, pouring coffee, refilling sugar caddies, offering tight smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Her coworker Darlene asked if she was okay once, and Miranda nodded too quickly. "Just tired," she lied. By the time the last customer paid and the lights dimmed, her bones felt like concrete. She untied her apron and tossed it in the bin by the back. As she stepped out into the cooling dusk, the amber haze of the streetlights caught a figure near the edge of the sidewalk. Shane. He leaned against a lamppost like he'd been born in the shadows. Jacket collar popped, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable but eyes sharp as razors. "You always wait outside like some old movie?" she asked, arms crossed against the rising breeze. He offered the faintest of smirks. "Only when there's a dame worth waiting for." She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You got time to talk?" "That's why I'm here." "Come on," she said, nodding down the block. "I know a place." The bar was low lit and familiar. Casey was behind the counter in her usual black tank and red lipstick, her hair swept up just high enough to tease. She raised a brow when she saw Miranda with Shane, but didn't say a word. Just poured Miranda her usual and slid Shane a whiskey without needing to ask. Miranda led him to a booth toward the back, where the noise dulled to a hum and shadows softened the edges of everything. "So," she said, leaning forward, "want to tell me why Jake showed up at my damn counter this morning?" Shane's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around the glass. "I was hoping to catch him before he got to you." Miranda tilted her head. "You knew he was here?" "I had a hunch. He's the kind your ex sends when things get personal." She swallowed hard. "He asked me to go back, said we could leave tonight." Shane said nothing for a long beat. Then softly, "So are you?" "No." Her voice didn't waver. "But I'm tired of being hunted, Shane." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." His words were simple, but they landed heavy. Not protective, not possessive, just steady, just present. Miranda looked at him, really looked at him, the tension in his shoulders, the quiet in his eyes. And for a moment, her heartbeat did that thing again. The thing it hadn't done in a long time. She took a sip of her drink and let the silence stretch, not needing to fill it just yet. Miranda's second drink was halfway gone by the time Shane started to unwind. His fingers traced the rim of his glass, his eyes flicking toward her like he was measuring how far he could go. "You want to know who I am?" he said finally. Miranda nodded. "Yeah, I do." He leaned back against the cracked leather of the booth, shadows falling across his cheekbones, the overhead light catching the edge of his stubble. "I grew up in Tennessee," he began. "Small town, barely made it on the map. My dad was a cop, old school type. Didn't say much, but when he did, you listened. My mom was a teacher, sweet. Too good for the town, really." Miranda didn't speak, just let him go on. "I went to college, criminal justice degree. Thought maybe I'd take my dad's badge one day, but I met someone. Ellie." His voice dropped when he said her name. "We got married, had 2 kids, bought this little house with a porch that creaked like hell every time the wind hit it." He paused, drank. One night, rain coming down in sheets. Ellie had taken the kids to her sister's. Coming back, something happened. Tire blew maybe. Maybe she hit a patch of oil. Doesn't matter. They went off the road. Miranda's chest tightened. By the time I got the call, it was over. All of it. She reached out without thinking, her hand resting on his for a second before she pulled it back. "I couldn't breathe in that town anymore," he said. "So I left. Ended up in Chicago. Did a lot of drinking. Got in a few fights. Then I met someone who tossed me a lifeline. Got me licensed as a PI. Said I had the kind of pain that makes you notice things others don't." He met Miranda's eyes. "Guess that's what brought me to you." She didn't know what to say at first. Her words had curled up somewhere behind her tongue. wrapped in the warmth of her buzz, in the slow burn of something forming between them. "You don't talk like that to everyone," she said, finally. "No," Shane responded. They sat in silence again, but this time it was different. The kind of silence that hums between two people who understand something wordless about each other. Miranda let her third drink slide down smoother than it should have, a warmth pooling low in her belly. Her hair had come loose from behind her ears. She leaned forward now, her elbows on the table, one hand absently toying with the edge of her glass. "I was starting to forget there were good men out there," she said, eyes half-lidded. "You might have just messed that up." Shane smiled, slow and sad. "I'm not a good man, Miranda. I just try to be better than I was yesterday." She let that hang between them. In her gut, she could feel it. That magnet pull again, same one that came from Jake once, before everything soured. But this felt steadier, rough edge but grounded. Casey leaned in, towel tossed over her shoulder like always, but her eyes clocked the look between them. "Another round?" she asked, a teasing lilt in her voice. Miranda looked at Shane, then back at Casey. "Yeah, why not? One more." Casey gave them a knowing smirk and drifted off. Shane's gaze stayed on Miranda, and after a beat, she let out a sigh, low and tired. "You told me your story," she said, voice barely above the hush of the bar's mellow hum. "I guess it's only fair I return the favor." Shane said nothing, just nodded once, the kind of gesture that didn't press. Miranda curled her fingers around the lip of her glass. Her rings caught the light in quick glints, like flashing thoughts she wasn't ready to say. Then, finally, she spoke. "I used to be someone's secret." She watched the words settle in the space between them before continuing. "Chicago. Not the glossy skyline version. The underbelly. I met him when I was 20. Too smart for my own good. Too broke to know better. He was charming in that way that looks safe from far off but bleeds trouble when it gets close." She paused as Casey slid 2 fresh drinks in front of them, then moved on with a wink. "He had money, power, influence that stretched over alleys and boardrooms alike. You ever watch a man ruin someone's life with a whisper and a grin? That was him." Shane didn't blink, just listened. "I wasn't just some girl on his arm. I was the girl he watched, controlled. When he didn't trust me, he sent someone to follow me." Her voice dipped. "Jake." That landed with a bitter curl in her throat. She sipped the whiskey before it could turn to acid. "I lived in a high-rise I didn't own, wore jewelry I never asked for, and slept with a pistol in my nightstand just in case the wrong person decided I was leverage. The night I left, I didn't take anything but what I could carry. I thought I was finally invisible." Shane let her breathe. Then, just as her eyes dropped to her glass, he said softly, "You had a record once. You were arrested outside a jazz club on Clark for obstruction. Charges dropped, but you gave them a fake name. You told the cop your name was Delia Starr." Miranda's eyes shot to his. For a moment, everything inside her stiffened, ready to bolt. But Shane lifted his hands gently, like he was calming a spooked horse. "I wasn't digging," he said. "Not really. When you went dark, I looked." Miranda blinked. There was a beat, then another. And then she said, "Delia Starr, huh? Damn, I was feeling dramatic that night." Shane let out a sudden snort of laughter, caught off guard. It startled him, too. He rubbed at his jaw like he was embarrassed by it. But Miranda grinned, genuinely. "You should do that more often. It makes you look less haunted." Their glasses clinked one last time. By then, the windows had gone streaky with the rain that had been threatening all day. Outside, the world had blurred to gray. Heavy drops drummed against the awning. "Shit," Miranda muttered, peering out. "I live 6 blocks from here." Shane didn't hesitate. "My place is just around the corner. If you want to wait out the storm..." Miranda looked at him, her brows lifting. "You offering shelter or an alibi?" He smiled, soft, no pressure. "Just a dry couch, maybe a warm blanket." When they stood, Miranda felt the room tilt a little. Not violently, just enough to know her balance had been traded for good company and too much whiskey. She steadied herself with a hand on the table and looked at him through the blur of liquor and streetlight. "Okay, Tennessee," she chuckled. "Let's go find that couch." The rain hit them like a velvet curtain, heavy but soft, the kind that drenched you in a heartbeat. Shane took her by the hand without asking and guided her down the block. His grip was warm, steady, and Miranda let herself follow it like a current. His place was tucked above a storefront, clean brick, iron railings. One flight of stairs and a worn door that opened into a space that was surprising, classy. Hardwood floors, dim lighting, framed black and white photos along the walls. Landscapes, not people. A small collection of books in a case by the fireplace, the spines worn but respected. The whole place smelled like cedar, bourbon, and something faintly citrusy. "This is you?" she asked, stepping in and toeing off her wet shoes. "Every inch," he said, tossing his keys in a bowl by the door. He led her to the living room, where a leather couch sat flanked by 2 armchairs and a sturdy wooden coffee table. He disappeared down the hall and came back with 2 towels, handed her one. She took it and started wringing out her curls. He shrugged off his jacket, ran the towel over his head, and gave her that boyish, crooked smile. The kind that probably got him in trouble when he was younger, and maybe still did. Miranda collapsed onto the couch, towel over her lap. "You keep saying you were on my ex's trail. How long?" Shane lowered into the armchair across from her. "A year, give or take. Got hired by a family whose son went missing after taking a job doing security for your ex. Found his body in a field outside Joliet. Weeks later, another. Same pattern. They both got too close or knew too much." Miranda sucked in a breath. Her hand idly traced the hem of her damp shirt. "What does he want now?" she muttered. "It's been a year since I left." "A year, Shane. He let me go." "People like him don't let go," Shane said, voice low. The towel was too damp now to help, and the chill was starting to bite. Without thinking, without apologizing, Miranda peeled off her clingy shirt, dropping it to the side. Her bra was simple, dark, and damp at the hem. She started drying off her arms and shoulders. When she looked up, Shane had stiffened, clearly trying not to look but doing a piss-poor job of it. She smirked. "Relax. I know you've seen a bra before." Shane let out a breath like he'd been holding it for an hour. Not every day someone undresses during a stakeout debrief. "Lucky you," she murmured, toweling off her collarbone with deliberate slowness. A beat passed between them, stretched taut like a violin string. Rain clattered against the windows, and the low hum of the city beyond faded into a distant hush. Miranda met his eyes. "You're different when you're off duty." He didn't deny it. "So are you." She leaned back, damp curls spilling down over her shoulders. The couch sighed under her weight, and so did something inside her chest, like it had been clenched too long and was finally easing up. "You keep surprising me, Tennessee." "You've got layers too, Star." The use of that name made her lips curl, almost despite herself. "Miranda," she corrected gently. He nodded, slow. Shane glanced at the clock. I should rinse off. You can take the bed if you want. I'll crash out here. Miranda blinked at him, her body heavy with liquor and leftover nerves. You sure? He nodded and gestured toward the hallway. Come on, I'll show you. The bedroom was like the rest of his place, uncluttered, intentional, masculine. The bed was made, a thick comforter in shades of gray and blue. The pillows smelled like cedar and something faintly spiced. Shane motioned toward it, but Miranda didn't get more than a step in before a wave of nausea rolled through her. She clutched the door frame. Shit. Hey, whoa. Shane was already gone down the hall, returning with a small waste bin in hand. She barely had time to kneel beside it before her stomach gave up the fight. It wasn't pretty. She hated that he was seeing it. He knelt beside her, not a word of judgment in his expression. Just calm, steady. His hand swept her hair back, held it gently away from her face as she leaned over and retched. Hey, he said, soft as fog. Just ride it out. You're okay. When she was finally done, face flushed and damp with sweat, he offered her the same towel he'd handed her earlier, now dry and warm from his touch. She dabbed her face, not meeting his eyes. Guess I'm a real seductress tonight, she muttered bitterly. Shane let out a quiet laugh. You'll recover your mystique by morning. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, towel still in hand. Thanks. He nodded once, straightening. Just get some rest, all right? I'm going to hit the shower. He disappeared into the bathroom, the door swinging mostly shut, but not all the way. Miranda meant to lie back, to bury her face in the pillows and forget the humiliating moment entirely. But the sound of the shower starting pulled her eyes toward the thin sliver of light in the hallway. Through that narrow crack in the door, she caught the shape of him, his back as he peeled off his shirt, the soft sound of jeans hitting tile. Then the haze of steam as the water poured over him, slicking his dark hair to his neck, his shoulders broad and bare through the fogged mirror. Miranda exhaled slowly, her head falling back against the pillow. She hadn't meant to look, and yet she didn't turn away. Shane stepped out of the bathroom, steam curling around him like a ghost that hadn't made peace. He wore sleep pants low on his hips, no shirt, a towel slung around his neck. His hair was damp and curling slightly at the edges. Miranda was sitting up now, back propped against his headboard. She looked pale but steadier. The alcohol had taken its toll, sure, but something in her eyes said she wasn't ready to call it a night. She gave him a sly half smile. You got one more favor in you, detective. He arched a brow, towel in hand. Depends. My jeans are soaked and sticking. I'm too drunk to fight 'em. He hesitated, like a gentleman, but she watched the flicker behind his eyes, that human crack in his armor. He crossed the room slowly, like stepping into dangerous territory. All right, he said quietly, crouching beside the bed. He worked the button and zipper carefully, eyes respectfully averted, but not entirely. His fingers brushed the damp denim as he slid them down her legs. His breath caught. She watched him through the fringe of lashes, her eyes dark with mischief. He gave her a crooked smile, one part amusement, one part self-preservation. When the jeans were off, he stood and pulled the covers up gently over her. Miranda slid lower into the bed, sighing as the warmth cocooned her. Under the blanket, she peeled off the rest, slipping into comfort, and maybe a bit of rebellion. Her underthings hit the floor in a silent whisper. She didn't say anything about it, and neither did Shane, but his glance at the small pile didn't go unnoticed. He shook his head, grinning to himself. Sleep it off, city girl. As he turned to leave, she called after him softly, Good night, Shane. He paused at the door, that towel still draped around his neck like some accidental armor. "Good night, Miranda." Then he disappeared into the hush of the apartment, the only sound the gentle patter of rain against the windows, and the low hum of thoughts neither of them had the courage to speak, yet. The room was quiet, save for the ticking of an old wall clock and the soft percussion of rain tapping against the window. Miranda had pulled the covers high, but sleep was slippery. She shifted beneath the blanket, her skin still warm from the liquor, her body still buzzing from everything. The scent of cedar lingered on the sheets, Shane's scent, and it wrapped around her like a memory she hadn't earned. She turned over, pillow cradled to her chest, eyes heavy but wide. After a while, she gave up trying. She slid out of bed, barefoot and quiet, tugging on the oversized shirt Shane had left folded at the foot. It swallowed her frame, hitting high on her thighs. The floor was cool beneath her toes as she padded into the dim hallway, moonlight casting silver across the hardwood. She found him on the couch. Shane was lying back, one arm tucked behind his head, the other resting lightly on his chest. His eyes opened the moment she stepped into the room. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, voice low and scratchy from the edge of dreams. "Too warm," she murmured, crossing her arms, her hip leaning against the doorframe. "Your bed's trying to suffocate me." He smirked, rubbing a hand over his face. "Sorry, I'll have a word with it." She took a few steps closer, bare legs catching the ambient glow of a street lamp outside. His eyes flicked downward, just for a second. She saw it. She smirked. "You sure you're not dreaming right now?" His gaze returned to hers, steady, but there was a twitch of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "If I am, I don't want to wake up." That made her pause, not because it was smooth, but because it wasn't. He meant it. She walked over and sank down beside him, the cushion shifting under her weight. His shirt hung loose on her frame, her knees drawing up beneath her. Close, almost too close. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then Miranda whispered, "Back in Chicago, I felt scared, like it was the beginning of something I couldn't control." Shane didn't move, just waited. She looked at him, eyes dark and unreadable in the low light. "But this, right now," her fingers brushed the back of his hand. "This doesn't scare me. That's what makes it dangerous." Shane's breath caught just enough to notice. And then he sat up, slowly, closing the space between them by half. He didn't reach for her, didn't lean in. He just watched. Miranda smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Tennessee. I'm not gonna jump you." He chuckled, the sound deep and quiet. "Didn't say I was worried." Their eyes held each other for a beat too long. Then Miranda sighed and stood, bare feet hitting the floor with a soft pat. She started back toward the bedroom. Halfway down the hall, she called over her shoulder, teasing, "Nice view, by the way." Shane leaned back, grinning in the dark. "Sweet dreams, Miranda." She didn't answer, just disappeared into the bedroom, the shirt swaying around her thighs like smoke. The motel was quiet, too quiet. One of those places where even the ice machine sounded guilty. Jake sat on the edge of the bed in a plain white tee, vest tossed over the chair. His hair was a little messy, and the bourbon in his glass had gone warm from neglect. On the table, a burner phone, a matchbook from some dive called the Hollow Light, and a note from the man neither he nor Miranda could shake. "Bring her home, or don't bother coming back." Jake read it again, then again, like the words might soften if he looked long enough. A knock at the door, two short, one long. He opened it. Victor stood there, towering over Jake. hair slicked back like it owed him money. He stepped in without asking, his cologne making the room feel smaller. "You look like hell," Vic said with a grin. "Guess she's still in your head." Jake didn't take the bait. He folded the note, slid it into the pocket of his vest. "You got something for me?" Vic tossed a phone on the bed. "Direct line. He wants updates." Jake raised an eyebrow. He could have texted. "He wants to make sure you're still loyal." Jake stared at him, said nothing. Vic laughed, low and amused. "You getting soft on her again?" Jake's jaw worked. "Get out." Vic raised his hands like a surrender. Sure. Just don't forget who writes the checks." The door clicked shut behind him. Jake sat back down, ran a hand through his hair, and stared at the photo on his burner. Chicago, summer. The bourbon didn't burn enough, so he left. Low Light was the kind of bar that didn't care what name you gave or what past you dragged in with you. Jake slid onto a stool, ordered another bourbon, and kept to himself until she showed up. She had curves that told stories and eyes that didn't ask permission. Maybe 10 years older, maybe not. Her voice was velvet soaked in gin. "You don't look like the usual kind of lost," she said, sliding into the seat beside him. Jake offered a tight smile. "What kind do I look like?" "The dangerous kind." She sipped her drink, one leg crossed high over the other, a heel dangling like a secret. Her blouse clung just right, and when she laughed, it was the kind that could make a man forget why he'd come in at all. They didn't talk much. That wasn't the point. The motel room smelled like rain and regret. Jake kicked the door shut with his foot. The woman's arms circled his neck, her lipstick a ghost against his throat. She let her coat fall to the floor. He tugged off his shirt, the fabric damp against his skin. Her hands found his jaw, his shoulders, the small scar just under his collarbone. For a second, he closed his eyes and saw Miranda instead. Damp hair, that half smile, the look she gave him once in a thunderstorm before she pulled away. He opened them. The woman was still there, warm and wanting. They made it to the bed like a hush falling over a crime scene. Clothes slipped away like memory, one piece at a time. The light stayed off. No promises were made. No names were repeated. It wasn't love. It wasn't even healing. But it kept the ghost quiet for a little while. In the morning, the room smelled like last night's bourbon and something sweeter. Maybe the perfume she wore. Maybe just the aftertaste of forgetting. Jake sat on the edge of the bed, bare-chested, jeans half-zipped, cigarette burning between his fingers but forgotten. The woman beside him was still asleep, curled under the thin blanket. One leg kicked out like she owned the room. He didn't know her name, didn't ask, didn't care. She'd been warm, willing, and just detached enough not to notice the look in his eyes when she touched him. That was all Jake needed. The next morning, Jake stood, bones stiff from a night on the uneven mattress, and pulled on his shirt from the chair. His hand found the burner phone on the table. Cheap, plastic, and heavy with the weight of obligation. One message. Update. Jake let out a slow breath, walked to the window, and pushed aside the heavy curtain. Rain still clung to the glass. The parking lot was gray and quiet, striped with puddles and cracked concrete. He typed, "She's here, but she's not ready," still pushing back. The reply came fast. "Make her ready. Time's running out." Jake stared at the screen. His thumb hovered, then tapped. "She's not the same girl." Long pause. The screen stayed empty. Then remind her who she belongs to. Jake muttered, "Fuck you," to no one, locked the screen, and slipped the phone into his coat. He stepped out into the parking lot, the cold hitting him like a slap. He walked a slow lap, Boots scuffing damp pavement, lit the cigarette again. He watched a bird dive between power lines, watched a truck roar past on the nearby highway. He didn't like this job, but he was too far in to walk away now. When he came back to the room, the bed was empty. The woman was gone. No note, no sound, not even the smell of her perfume. Just her imprint on the sheet, and one less reason to pretend he had a soul. Miranda didn't know it, but midnight was set. And the storm, well, it was already on its way. All Miranda could do now was decide which shadow to trust when the rain came down. That's on the next episode of Miranda Waits for Midnight.